Tonight we're going to continue our discussion of the Asian Sea Trading Network. Again, as Europe developed further its colonies in the Americas, it then went and set up some colonies in Asia. Some important words to know when we discuss trade in general are commodity. So a commodity is something that is traded. So it's a good, essentially. It can be a raw good, like sugar, tobacco, etc., or it can be a finished product, like textiles or fabrics, carpet. So when you're writing your papers or discussing goods that are being traded, rather than say things or stuff, you can say a good or a commodity. Currency is also important, and currency is what you use to pay for a good or service. So dollar bills are currency, coins are currency, silver and gold can be currency. And in this period, we see a shift from the use of bartering and trading goods for other goods for trading goods for currency. Make sure you write down commodity and currency on your notes, even though there isn't a section for them. The Asian Sea Trading Network had 3 major zones. Make sure you write down some of the key goods that are available in each zone. There is the Arab zone in Arabia, as you can see on your map, the India zone in the center of the Indian Ocean Network, and the Chinese zone. Make sure you write down some goods that are available in the Chinese area. Again, a lot of this is a review from units 1 and 2. Africa, Japan, and East Indies are also involved in trade and stops along the trade route. So it's not only Arabia, India, and China. Take a look at the map and some of the goods traded in each region. And you see down there the to and the from. You can see what goods were going to Arabia and what goods were leaving Arabia. So you can see that Arabia sent out coffee and silk and received spices. India sent out cloth, yarn, silk, indigo, pepper, and received silver, etc. So a few details about the Asian Sea Trading Network before Europe entered.
Unit 3,
much like we've seen occur in the Americas,
Unit 3.
Europe is going to travel to Asia and attempt to take over.
Review.
So the first,
we have monsoon winds,
European nation to arrive as
ship
the
technology
Portuguese
dictated
the trade
and
routes available.
several factors
Led Portuguese to enter the trade system using force.
The boats sailed
rather
along the
than
shoreline
trading
in order to
peacefully,
avoid
as
unpredictable
had been going
open
on
seas,
in the
because again the
Asian Sea
ships were
Trading
not
Network.
equipped to
The
deal
first
with
is
big
mercantilism,
storms,
which we've discussed,
and carry
and
food long
mercantilism
distances.
stressed
power.
There are 2 general
based on how much
characteristics
silver and
of
gold
the
a
Asian
country
Sea
had.
Trading
Remember,
Network in Unit
mercantilism,
2.
the idea is to
One,
hold
there is
on
no
to your
central
silver and
control.
gold, to
There's
sell
nobody
more
who's
than you buy.
controlling the military
And the Portuguese
or
didn't
keeping
want to send
track
their silver
of
to
the
Asia.
merchants. And everybody
Also,
is sort of benefiting
The
from
Portuguese
this
are
trade.
worried about trading
Asia
their
is
silver
receiving,
with
China is
enemies
receiving goods
such
from
as
India
Muslims,
and happy
which is
about
a
it, and
key
India is
reason
receiving
for
goods from
the
China and
Europeans
happy
in
about it.
general to go to the Indian Ocean via
You can
sea
predict that
rather
this
than
will
on the Silk
change
Road.
in
Because
Unit
remember
3.
that Muslims are in the Middle East, and the Europeans would have to travel through the Middle East, pay taxes to the Muslims while trading on the Silk Road. So the Europeans wanted to find a way to circumvent or work around the Muslims and not give their enemies from the Crusades their silver. Another issue the Portuguese had is they had nothing of value to exchange with Asian merchants. Remember, when we look at the map, the Asian Sea Trading Network already has access to manufactured goods such as silk, cloth, pepper, spices, porcelain, etc. So basically, China and Asia were not interested in the silver the Portuguese had to offer. So the Portuguese had to figure out another way to get into trade with Asia, and that ended up being by using force, since the Asians did not want to buy any of the Portuguese products. The Portuguese also had superior ships and weaponry because early in the 1500s, the Portuguese were ahead of the game of exploration, so they had much better weapons and ships than those of Asia, India, China, etc. By the early 1500s, Portuguese were capturing towns along trade routes. They wanted a monopoly over key products. So if you look again on the map above, you see cities like the southern tip of India, there's Ceylon, And in the Dutch East Indies, there's Batavia. And those types of port cities is where the Portuguese were setting up towns where they had control. So only in the port cities. They were not setting up colonies as the Portuguese did in the Americas. Think about why Portugal might want a monopoly over key Asian products. Who do they plan to sell those products to? Hopefully you guessed that the Portuguese wanted a monopoly on Asian goods because they wanted to sell them to the other European nations and gain capital that way, which was again a mercantilist principle. That would be correct. So the Portuguese, though, were not able to maintain that monopoly. Instead, the Dutch and the English, as the Dutch and the English expanded their troops and their armadas and fighting ability, gained control of Portuguese ports in Asia. The Dutch and English, however, adopted more peaceful trading patterns rather than going in with their weapons and simply fighting the natives. Think about why that might be beneficial to have a more peaceful trading system. Lastly, the European and Asian trade. What's very different, and you learned this today as well in your comparison, is that Europe did not set up colonies in Asia as it did in the Americas. In Asia, it was not easy for the Europeans to control inland, so to move further past the port cities. Asian armies are too large, they're developed, there are empires such as the Mughal Empire and the Ming that exist in Asia, so there are centralized governments that are ready to fight off any enemies who might try to attack. So this eliminated European weapons advantage. There were a large number of people, they were fighting from land, whereas the Europeans were fighting from ships. So unlike the Americas, the Europeans did not settle and create colonies in Asia at this time. Be sure for homework that you sign on at 6 p.m. Or after, but as soon as possible, to pick out a book for your project and study for your vocab quiz and map quiz on Thursday. Have a nice